Hello and evening everybody. As I said earlier today, I wanted to make another video about grain storage. So welcome, hello. Thank you to everybody who has been watching and sharing and making comments and contacting me. It's been really nice to have that contact. So I wanted to talk about, I'm not going to show you my face and everything of all this because look at this, right. Okay, that just is like scratching the surface of all the grains, so to speak, that I keep in my store cupboard, because most people think of grains as rice, pasta, wheat stuff, but there's a huge amount more, and I'm just quickly going to go through it all because we're talking about food storage. I never have very long-term food storage because we go through stuff and we use it, so it's never needing to be stored long enough to need long-term storage with like vacuum sealing or anything like that. Give me a second. Back again. Okay, let me just dust this off. I have food storage places all around downstairs. Okay, now this is the only long-term food storage item as far as grains that I have. A bit dusty. Is my wheat in Mylar bags from 2003. That's the only long-term food storage I have. It was bought in 2003, packaged at the same time because it was a bulk load. Whole group of us from church. We had a big, more than tons delivery of wheat, and we bagged it up at the chapel, put in the desiccant sachets and sealed them up. So this, in Mylar bags, the wheat would last, provided it's completely dry before you put it in the bags. This will last up to 40 years. And I had used it, I don't use it often, but this is my long-term backup, and it's the whole grain wheat. We do occasionally use it. We actually don't use it that much, but we had taken a little margarine tub full once to feed the ducks and the geese at the park. But I prefer to keep the wheat for emergency long-term storage, especially for things like sprouting, because obviously wheat grass is nutritionally one of those super foods. So not just for grinding. I think if you use wheat for grinding for flours, you are really using quite a lot of wheat for a small amount of flour, but you can use wheat for so much more. Okay, but the Mylar bags, I wouldn't use them now, because for me on my personal journey that is not an environmentally friendly option. It is not recyclable, so it's not zero waste, but it is, if you want to keep stuff for a very long time, for many years, Mylar is one of the best ways to do it if you have the desiccant sachets and you vacuum seal it. The only problem with this is you need to be careful where you keep it, because the bags can tear really easily. But yeah, one option. That's the usual suspects for grain storage. As your usual plain white flour. I have strong white flour. It's practically the only white flour stuff we use. I also have spelt flour, which I mix in with wholemeal flour and white flour for breads, just to get in a bit more fiber and a bit more wholesomeness. I also have gram flour, which is technically gram flour is chickpea flour, which is a legume, but it is so useful, not just for food, but also a natural hair shampoo replacement. If you want to check out how that's used, check out Fairyland Cottage, zero waste natural shampoo. Okay, that one, and it's used in a lot of different things. I've even seen people make a vegan, what do you call it? A vegan cheese out of chickpea flour. I've never tried it myself, but you know, if you're living off store cupboard food and you can't get cheese, I suppose it could work. I've never tried it. Okay, then the usual other suspects that everybody knows about is couscous, which is a wheat product. So if you're celiac, you probably want to avoid couscous. Oats, I think a lot of people who are celiac also can't have oats, but this is the ground oats, not the rolled oats. It's the whole grain ground oats, and that is fantastic to use in crumbles. It also is used as a lovely porridge. It actually makes a really nice porridge. The other porridge that I use is the whole grain rolled oats, the jumbo whole grain rolled oats, and that also I use in crumbles, I use in bacon, and I use as porridge. And I prefer to go with the whole grain stuffs because they're nutritionally more complete than the refined ones. So if you're having to live off store cupboard stuff, you want as whole food as you can to get your nutrition out of it. Okay, I love oats, by the way. It's one of my favorite breakfasts. Okay, so those are the usual grains other than rice. This is again a whole grain. This is red rice, whole grain red rice. I also have a red raw rice from Sri Lanka. I got this at Asda in a great big bag, so the rest of the big bags in the other store cupboard in the living room, and I'll just top this up when it's empty. This one, you cook it like brown rice. It's a whole grain, it's raw, so another whole grain I like to keep, so as many whole grains as possible. This is a whole grain couscous. This one is, it's a whole wheat one. See, you get a normal couscous and then you get a whole wheat couscous, both made out of wheat, so not good if you are intolerant or have allergies, but still good for anybody else. This is a brown bulgur wheat. This is again a whole grain bulgur wheat. Use it like you do couscous. It'll cook the same as couscous, so you can put it in boiling water with the stocks and anything else you want and just leave it to soak, and it'll soak up all the liquid and then it'll be ready to use. Or you could cook it for a few minutes and then leave it to just soak up the water. It can also be used as a replacement for mince meat, if you like, or TVP. It's obviously not going to be a soy-based thing, it's just the grains, but it gives you that texture. I've stick it in soups and stews, and I have used it in bologneses to bulk it up before if I want to extend ingredients and make them go further. Pearl barley, I think that's also got gluten in, so if you're gluten intolerant you don't want to have the pearl barley, but that is excellent for soups and stews and risottos even. I've made risotto with that before. Kamut, which is a type of wheat, and this one is already pre-prepared and cooked, so it'll cook in 10 minutes. I don't use it often. It reminds me of, do you remember Ebly, the brand Ebly? I think it's the same stuff. I quite like it, it's nice. Then hubby doesn't like couscous, but he'll eat giant couscous. Okay, so this cooks the same. You do need to boil this a little bit before letting it soak. It'll cook in 8 to 9 minutes. I write that on the front of the jar, so I know how long it takes to cook stuff. And he'll have that, but again, it's wheat and it's refined. It's not a whole grain, so it's not one we use often. Another one I like to use, which is technically not a grain, it's not like wheat or rice or oats. It is a pseudo grain. So I've got quite a few pseudo grains here to show you as well to use instead of these grains if you're gluten intolerant. Buckwheat, okay? Buckwheat does not contain gluten. It is not wheat. It is a relative of the rhubarb plant. It is a seed, and it does have essential amino acids in there. So it's a good replacement. far more nutritious, and it's full of fiber, and it is a whole grain, but not a grain, it's a pseudo grain. Okay, obviously popcorn, lifesaver for your mental well-being. If you're having to live off store cupboard food for a while and you've got no money, this comes in great, because when we've had sort of in between paydays and there's not much money and I'm refusing to go to the shops and my grandson wants crisps, I say sorry, it's popcorn. Movie night wouldn't be movie night without popcorn. Okay, more pseudo grains that most people are familiar with. You can buy the mix. This is red and white quinoa, but it does have couscous in this one. It's a mix, so the couscous makes it not good for people with gluten intolerance, but the quinoa is a pseudo grain and it has 8 essential amino acids in there, so a good replacement if you're on whole food plant-based, and it's a good grain to have with a lot of other things that makes, you know, with if you have these with your protein filled veggies and stuff, it will make sure you get a good balance of the right amino acids, which are the obviously essential part that you usually get with your animal-based proteins, but you can get from plant-based as well. Quinoa, again, quinoa is a funny pseudo grain. Most people don't really like it much. Hang on a bit, I just noticed my aloe vera has got too much water. Sorry, sidetracked. Some people don't like quinoa much because there tends to be a little bit of a bitter aftertaste. That is because quinoa contains saponins. So what you do with your quinoa is you soak it before you use it for at least an hour, and then you rinse it and then cook it, and that should help counteract any of the bitterness that comes from the saponins. So yeah, that's a good one. Quinoa, and it also is one of those full of amino acids, and it contains protein as well, so that is a good pseudo grain to have a very big variety of food in your store cupboard, so that nutritionally you get more nutrition and you get more fiber and more interest, because psychologically you need to be careful of sticking to same old boring stuff in your store cupboard stuff. Quinoa also comes in flakes like porridge, so you can cook it like porridge, and I have done it before, I've cooked it before, but then I didn't know about rinsing off the saponins, so I think I would do that again. I would soak it a bit, drain it off, and then cook it. Okay, amaranth. I've spoken about amaranth, and I grew my own amaranth this year. It's in the other cupboard there. I grew the red one, the Jamaican callaloo, but this is the usual one most people think of as amaranth. This as well is a very good pseudo grain. Also got enough of the essential aminos. And you should actually, if you like to eat red meat, apparently amaranth is a good one to help you digest the red meat. We don't have red meat anymore, so it's not a problem, but that's a good pseudo grain to have, just like you would any of the other pseudo grains. It cooks fairly quickly. You could even pop it like popcorn in a dry pan, and it's okay, but it is so teeny tiny. You might want to mix it like sprinkle it on, I don't know, like the little popcorn. I have tried it and it does taste popcorny, but it's I would think you'd have it as a cereal. If you pop it like that, you'd pop a huge amount and then have it like cereal, but that would kind of be a long-winded way of going about it. I just stick it before using it for like couscous. Use it like couscous, I would. Okay, what else have we got? I have got white rice. Most people have white rice, but I don't cook to eat white rice anymore because we have whole grains. Even brown rice. I've run out of brown rice, but I will buy some more because that's a whole grain rice. The white rice I keep for washing out my granddaughter's bottles, or even other bottles for when I empty out like the ferments and stuff. Putting about a tablespoon of dry rice with some salt in your bottle with your dishwater is a really nice scourer that gets in places that bottle brushes can't. So I keep white rice for cleaning. It's gentle enough to not scratch the glass, but good enough to get into all the little nooks and crannies and clean that out. So I shake up the bottles with the soap and the rice and salt in it, and it cleans and disinfects because of the salt. Good vinegar as well, that will also disinfect. But it really is handy for cleaning bottles that you can't get bottle brushes in, or it'll get to places that bottle brushes don't. What else is there that I haven't mentioned yet? Oh, right. Noodles. A lot of people buy the noodles, the cheapy ones. We always used to buy them because they were handy. But because we're trying to go more whole food plant-based, we're trying to get whole grain stuff. And even though this is, it's been refined, it's not in its natural state, we use the whole grain rice vermicelli for noodles. And it's the whole grain and it's rice, it's not wheat. So that's a good one to have as well. Let's see, does it say it's gluten? Yep, it's gluten free. So whole grain rice vermicelli is gluten free. Good one to have. Okay, and the other one that I use that I like but most other people in the family don't is the soba noodles. Soba noodles are Japanese noodles. They are made from buckwheat. You can get buckwheat only, but these ones are a blend of buckwheat and wheat. Yeah. Wheat flour, buckwheat flour, water and salt. So these ones do have wheat in them, so no good if you're gluten intolerant or try to avoid gluten. But you can get gluten-free soba noodles, I think, because it's made from buckwheat. And as I said, buckwheat is not a wheat, it's a pseudo grain. So there is that. That is most of the grains that I have. You can get more and you can get other stuff as well, but that's just what I've got. Talking about grains and talking about corn, I do have cornstarch, but this is the last of it. I don't really buy it anymore because it's so refined, and I think it's not organic, so it will be and it's modified maize starch, I think. So we've stopped using that, and instead of cornstarch for thickening sauces, because I use flour traditionally for like gravies, but for thickening sauces sometimes I used corn flour, but I found that ground arrowroot is a much better thickener because it's from arrowroot plant, from the powdered root, and it is a really good instant thickener. If you mix that with a tiny bit of water and then mix it with your sauces, that's a really good thickener. I also keep a whole storage of it, and I will always keep buying more whenever I see it. Even if I have like 4 of these, I'll be happy, because it's not a grain, it's a root, but it's used as a thickener the same as you would flour. So that's why it's in the same, I put it in the same category. But it's also a basic raw ingredient for homemade toothpaste. So that is why I store ground arrowroot, not just for thickening food, the same way I would flour. So there you have it. There's a lot of things that I, when I bake, I try to use less of the white flour and replace it with, like for cakes, I put in ground almonds instead. What else? I'm trying to think what else. Oh, in crumbles and things, I use the ground almonds and I use the oats, and I only just put a sprinkling of flour in really, but I don't really use it much, and you can get away with not using it at all. But there you go. That is it for my store cupboard stuff. I do keep things in my old jars, old jam jars and peanut butter jars and hot chocolate spread jars from before, and any other jars like that, the plastic lidded ones particularly for them, because I can't use them for making jams and things. I've used my old barley cup jars. I suppose you get coffee and stuff like that, because we don't drink coffee, but we drink barley cup, and it comes in a really handy jar like that. Like I said, it doesn't have to be airtight because we go through the stuff quite fast, so we change it up. It doesn't have to be stored long term in vacuum. What else? I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's about it. So, oh, and pasta. A lot of people store pasta. I don't. It doesn't last very long. You've got to store that in an airtight container to keep it for a longer period of time. we don't eat much of it. My grandson eats it, so occasionally we make it for him, but we don't like pasta anymore because it's refined and because it's not whole grain. Even though we use whole wheat pasta before, it still has the same effect on our stomachs. It's a bit heavy and we don't like it that much, so it's a very rare thing that we actually have pasta anymore. But that takes up a lot of space and it doesn't store for that long. It is quite more susceptible to moisture, so you have to keep it in an airtight container. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. For now, I suppose that'll do. I'll probably finish this video and then it'll come back to me. But we're at 20 minutes already, so that is time up. So, I'll leave you with that. I'll catch up with you again soon. See how you're doing with your self-assessment on your self-reliance, your winter preparations, and your store cupboard stuff. So I hope that you're thinking about, you know, what you're putting in your store cupboard and how you use it, and rotate it, because a lot of people got stuff in their cupboard that ends up being chucked in the bin because after a while they're not using it. So rotate it and use it. Buy things for your store cupboard that you use, that you will use, and that you rotate, so that you don't have to do long-term storage. So if you've got a food storage, not just for emergencies but everyday use, then you're continually rotating it and it won't go off and you're used to it. Because there's some people who store their grains for a long-term food storage for an emergency, like as in prepping, but they don't use it every day, and then they come to use their whole grains when they need it and their bodies are not used to it. It's a bit of a shock, so it could have a bit of a laxative effect, and for some people maybe the opposite. But use your storage every day. Make sure you put stuff in it that you use, that you like, because there's no good storing stuff you don't like. But also give yourself a chance to learn to eat things that you don't normally eat, so that you could increase your variety. The more variety you have, the better your nutrition, and the less you have to rely on supplements. So that's just my thoughts on that. Let me know in the comment box underneath what your thoughts are on that, how you're doing with your own food storage, or what you do and don't like, or how you store stuff. It's always interesting to learn from others. So feel free to comment, like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like, but don't forget to get the message out to other friends and family to make sure that everybody you know has everything that they need, and that they know how to do these things. My favorite channels on food storage as well is a YouTube channel, Rain Country. Absolutely love that. Think of Rain Country, Fairyland Cottage, and also Pick Up Limes. They're fantastic ones on food and food storage and whole food, plant-based foods. So it'll help you to learn how to use. They teach you a lot more on how to use your food storage. So that is fantastic. Check them out. And I'll speak to you again soon. In the meantime, happy cooking. Speak to you soon. Bye.